everyone. My name is Kathy, but for most of the day I'm known as Miss H at Central High School, where I've taught for the past few years. I'm really proud to work at the largest public high school in Providence that serves a multilingual and multinationality student population. I won't spend too much time gushing about my work or how it is that we embraced and celebrated the arrival of more than 40 new immigrant and refugee newcomer students mid-year, and how those students are picking up the English language and course content at a rate that I can't really fathom. If you witnessed the student walkout on Inauguration Day, you already know that our city's students of color know how to speak their own truth. Instead, I wanted to share with you my own immigration story. I came to the United States with my parents from China when I was 7 years old. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and for toys, my dad inherited one of those upright dish drying racks from a friend, and I'd squeeze my Beanie Babies in between the metal slots for bowls and my picture books in the brackets for plates. During the holidays, it doubled as our Christmas tree, and my mom would paint fruit as ornaments. And as a Chinese-American young woman, I didn't escape discrimination wholesale, but I did manage to avoid hateful profiling. I thought I passed as non-foreign, especially when we moved into suburbia as I started secondary school. But we immigrants in this country occupy a double political space, one of allegiance and loyalty to the United States, alongside a devotion to our countries of origin where many of our relatives remain. This is a double political space that our politicians tolerate with cautious patience, swinging towards intolerance during periods of international tension or war. Every day we are profiled, policed, tokenized, exoticized, and expected to swallow it silently as currency for our permission to grasp at this mythologized American dream. But as my immigrant and minority brothers and sisters understand, when you are profiled for long enough, made into someone else's story or stereotype, you grow a hunger to reclaim your own past. For me, that came in the form of temporarily dropping out of college, much to my parents' horror, and moving to San Francisco, California to collect oral histories of Chinese Americans. Specifically, I wanted to know more about Angel Island, a small island off the coast of San Francisco, and its detainees, because while Ellis Island in New York is a symbol for immigrant optimism and new opportunity, Angel Island's history rarely makes an appearance in U.S. history books. Most immigrants arriving on its shores were from China, Japan, Korea, and Russia. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was the first federal legislation banning an entire ethnic group from entering this country. The lawmakers used a rhetoric of Chinese cheap labor to paint depictions of a homogenous group of immigrants, the dirty, violent, and destructive Chinaman. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does rhyme. National security has often been linked to widely felt, if not widely articulated, racial anxiety. The U.S. Scott Act of 1882 then barred 20,000-some Chinese, some of whom had residency permits and had lived and worked in the U.S. for years, from returning after leaving the country, many to visit family back in China. There were several hundred people at the port of San Francisco who were prevented from landing because of the act, similar to the folks at U.S. airports a few weeks back. So from 1910 to 1940, about 175,000 Asian men, women, and children spent anywhere from 3 days to 3 years in detention on Angel Island, quarantined in wooden barracks on the hidden from view south side of the island, and subjected to hours-long interrogations, questions manipulatively written to make it nearly impossible to achieve entry, and delivered by wrongfully empowered officials. Women and children were afforded a half-hour of outdoors exercise every day, while most of the men were shuttered in their bunk rooms. I spent months finding surviving detainees, and many had kept their detention secret for decades, even from close family members. The Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed in 1943, and when I was having these conversations in 2011, it was for some the first time they spoke of their time in detention. Being targeted, policed, and held does unspeakable things to your sense of self-worth. Immigration legislation passes in places where fear and misunderstanding dominate. Angel Island exposes a dark chapter in our country's immigration history, one that we are close to re-invoking if we don't hold our local elected officials accountable. We must call on leaders to reckon with this country's past mistakes of adopting and enforcing discriminatory immigration policies that belie its stated ideals of liberty and justice for all. What happened to my ancestors on Angel Island was unconscionable and must never be repeated again. When the U.S. Park Service surveyed the old barracks on Angel Island, prepared to raise them, they discovered something remarkable. Hundreds of poems had been etched, presumably by detained men and women, into the walls in traditional Chinese calligraphy. Many of them have been transcribed and translated, and I'd like to share a few excerpts with you today. Thank you so much for being here and for listening to my story. So these are from the poems themselves. The barbarians do not respect justice. They continually promulgate harsh laws to show off their prowess. They oppress the overseas Chinese and also violate treaties. They examine for hookworms and practice hundreds of despotic acts. America has power but not justice. In prison, we were victimized as if we were guilty. given no opportunity to explain. It was really brutal. And then this part, which I love. Experiencing a little ordeal is not hardship. Napoleon was once a prisoner on an island.